And there was a little guy, 5 and a 7 and a 9, 11, mother and father. And they're eating, and all of a sudden it's crowded, it's having lunch. And all of a sudden the little boy falls to the floor choking. And the mother and father, the people are looking, all the people, the patrons in the restaurant are eating. They're screaming, call an ambulance, call a doctor, do the Heimlich, do something, save this, the child is laying, he's turning blue. And this woman walked up, very nice looking lady, she said, stay very calm, folks. And she picked the little kid up off the floor and she stood him up on a table. She pulled his little trousers down and she reached in and she took him by his little testicles and she started squeezing and moving and all of a sudden, boom, the food came flying out. The kid was crying. They gave her a standing ovation that people couldn't believe that, thank God, that saved the child. And the father said, Doctor, I don't know how to thank you. I mean, if it wasn't for you, my poor baby, I didn't. She said, that's nothing. Don't worry about it. It's fine. He'll be fine. He said, but doctor, you don't understand. You saved my child's life. Anything you want, whatever. She said, no, I don't want anything. Just the baby is fine. Take him home after. So he says, well, doctor, I can't thank you enough. She says, I'm not a doctor. He says, well, what do you do? She said, I'm a divorce attorney. Think about that one, guys.
Ow. Yep.
Anyway.
Is that joke
Take
from
two.
the Wrecking Crew era? Is that joke old?
Well, that's the last couple of years. Yeah, the last
Actually, the
couple
one
of
thing,
years.
and I'll get out of the way, that how hiring people, implementing so many things, and the camaraderie of the Wrecking Crew, the one thing, and because it's Guitar Center and it's equipment related, is that this is a chance for you to at least talk about the thing, although you didn't have the patent on it, you introduced that octopus big drum set.
Octoplus.
Octopus,
Yeah.
right. And so there's a actual piece of physical equipment that informed so many of the records from Presley to Spectre sessions. They even had parts of it at United Western. They still have some of the stuff in the room there too. But I think you should talk about that piece of equipment, then ask what you want.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Let's address
It's
It
a
was
drum
just
thing.
one of those things that I never patented that I should have, and I gave it away. But that was just out of the kindness of my heart. These people were hiring me, and they were nice people.
So you were more an inventor than a musician, or just
You know, I was just creating things. Excuse me, did I screw up your mic?
Okay. No, that's all right.
I was just reminded of a story when I did that. I got to tell you, it's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard.
Please.
And it's a Hollywood story. It's a Hollywood screenwriter, and he's going to a convention in New York. Screenwriters, movie people, schmoozing, but he refuses to fly, and he's on the train. And about the third day, the conductor comes by his compartment. He says, "Excuse me, sir, we're in New Mexico, and we're going to be stopping in this little town called Alamogordo. And it's a wonderful little town. There are these Indians that perform for the passengers, and they sell trinkets and little things, doodads. And the Indians here are very famous for their memories because they go back to the 1600s. They can tell you about. It was all these stories are passed down from the chiefs and their fathers and great grandfathers. So the writer said, "That's great. I'll check it out." So the train made the stop, and he gets off, stretches his legs, and he's walking around. He sees the little children doing the Indian dances, and it's just a wonderful day. And he happens to look over, and there's a great big Indian guy standing over there. So he walks over, and he says, "Excuse me, sir, but I understand you folks are known for your memory of all the way back to the 1600s. I mean, you just don't forget things." And the Indian kind of nodded. So he's going to have some fun. He's a Hollywood writer. So he says, "Could you tell me what you had for breakfast on July the 17th, 1947? And this Indian stood there and looked at him strange, and he said, "Eggs." And the writer said, "Eggs. Sure, everybody has eggs. Has some memory." And he goes to New York. A week later, he comes back, He's the same train, makes the same stop. He gets off, he's going to stretch his legs, have a cigarette. That same Indian's standing over. He said, I'm going to get that son of a gun. He really did it to me. So he walks over to this big Indian who's standing there, still standing there. He says, how? And the Indian says, scrambled. Now that's a joke that Mort Lewis told me. Mort Lewis was the manager of Simon and Garfunkel for 1,000,000 years, but I had never heard that story from him until recently. And we call each other every once in a while and tell gags. And it's come down to the old prison story where you say 37, everybody laughs. You know that story?
Okay, I'm going to.
Well, these convicts, there's a new convict, and he's just into the dining room, and they're eating, and he hears a guy yell, 61, and everybody goes, hi, and he started laughing. He looks around, what the hell is that? And all of a sudden, another guy yells, 42, and everybody laughs. And so the guy said, what is that? He said, here in prison, we've heard every joke, and they have numbers now. So instead of telling the whole joke, the guy just yells a number, and that's what's funny. So the guy said, oh, and he's sitting there eating, and all of a sudden, the new guy, and he looked around, he said, 26, and nobody laughed. So he said, what happened? I mean, wasn't that a joke? He said, you know, some people just can't tell the story.
You got a question?
Silly stuff. Silly stuff. And so here we are.
Did
You
feel
want like
you were
this,
at a
are we
reunion
cutting it?
today?
It was a wonderful reunion, yeah. It's been tremendous going out on the road with Denny. I've been doing some of the film festivals,
Right.
doing a few jokes, schmoozing a little bit with the people. And it's a wonderful, wonderful time. You know, I am semi-retired. I mean, I want to be completely retired, but certain things come up I have to do. We just finished a great movie all about skateboarding, and a great little arranger from Florida came out here. I think it's for Disney, I'm not sure. And so, you know, every once in a while I will go in and do something. Don Randy and I both worked on that recently. And, you know, once in a while we'll play for the movie on, I guess it's Friday or Saturday, 28th, whatever day that is. And we'll play after the movie shows of some of the Wrecking Crew. I don't think Glenn will be there because he's got a thing in Canada. He was here with us today, but he had to go. He's going up to Canada for that.
When did you meet Glenn first?
You know, I was very fortunate that when I hit town, trying to work. I started working in what in those days what we used to call beer joints. They were country joints, country bars. The Palomino was very famous in North Hollywood. The Crossbow, I almost said the Oxbow, but there were a lot of oxes in that club anyway. There were a lot of those clubs, and the James brothers, Jesse and another one named for the James, all musicians. And I can't remember all the people who used to play there, but it was an amazing time. And Glenn, that's when I first met Glenn, and he was just a screaming guitar player. Now, I was a jazz drummer. You know, I didn't know from rock and roll, but I had been working off and on with this young man, Tommy Sands, who became such a tremendous teenage idol. And the guys that he worked with, a couple of young fellows, Eddie Edwards and Leon Bagwell, and Scotty Turner. Scotty Turner started writing all this stuff for Harry Nilsson. And the other guys kind of wanted to retire. They're really from Texas, and they kind of did. Scotty Turner went on. He'd been a big producer in Nashville for years and years. But I learned all this rockabilly from these guys. And that literally, Glenn and I and Leon Russell, we were sort of the nuclei of that, what I started calling us the Wrecking Crew. Because when we got into rock and roll, what happened was that all of these producers wanted rock musicians. There were no rock musicians. We were the rock musicians. We were doing the demos for the guys that wrote songs in those days. Perry Botkin and so many of the great songwriters. And so a lot of those records became masters. So now producers, they wanted those guys that are doing that. Well, the older established musicians used to say, these kids are going to wreck the business.
That's the genesis of the name.
Yeah, and I started calling us the Wrecking Crew. It was me and Glenn, Jimmy Bond, who was here today, just a couple other people, Lyle Ritz, Ray Pullman, one of the great bass players, if not the greatest. But pretty soon, all of this other side people were coming in, but we were still the nucleus, even though bands were getting bigger. I don't have a cough button here. And so we were very fortunate that they started calling us for these rock dates. There were some great drummers out here. They refused to pay rock and roll. It was garbage. These kids, they don't know anything about music. They don't read music. They're just a bunch of hillbilly type kids. They didn't know we were all graduates of music conservatories, music schools, percussion institutes. I mean, it was an amazing thing. And we finally got into the studios, and the arrangers came in and laid music in front of us. We played it, and they'd say, gee, how do you guys do that? And Tommy Tedesco, God bless him, he stood up one day and he said, we practice a lot during the day. And that became a catchphrase for many years, because we were doing 4, 5, 6, 7 sessions a day. I mean, 2 or 3 3-hour sessions, and then in between we would do jingles and we would do commercials and we would do overdubs, especially me. I mean, I'd be called in, do a tambourine, all of a sudden there's another session. They'd call me in, we need conga drums while you're on your 5-minute break. Okay, fine. In the next studio. And so that's what happened, and all of a sudden the older guys were saying, these kids are going to wreck the business. Well, we became the Wrecking Crew, and within, I got to tell you, within a month of where we were doing these dates, that went from the $100 a week at the Palomino, and we're making $1,000 a day at Western Studios or Gold Star. I mean, all of these older guys now are saying, hey, could we come to the studio and watch you work and learn something about that kind of music? For a drummer, it's just we were playing. Whether it was country, no matter what you're playing, it's a backbeat. For a drummer, it's the simplest thing in the world. You play time. You play a backbeat on 2 and 4.